Hey everybody, and welcome back to this third and final part of this rubber and glass video that I've been making, having it focus entirely on Luffy and especially Nami, most definitely Nami, it's like that. So thank you so much for joining me for this third part, and I hope to like really finish it all in this video right here. There might be a chance I might have to continue on to another video and like that, and I'll let you know if it ever comes to it and like that. So let's just get into the video, okay? All right. So a bit of a recap and like that to sort of explain what these videos have been about before I get into the context of what this video is going to be, alright? So in the first video, I sort of explained, like, ever since we found out that Luffy's Delphi was the sun god Nika, I sort of went over, like, how I exactly chose to use glass as the sort of the embodiment of the character. So just like Luffy's body, like whoever eats the Nika fruit, or basically the sun god Nika fruit, ends up taking on the properties of rubber, right? Their body literally transforms into a rubber-like state, right? And I wanted the same concept, but instead of having it on rubber, I chose to go with glass. And that was sort of how the first video was, where I sort of explained how I chose to look for the right kind of element. What was the right kind of thing to choose to represent the moon? And I felt like glass was the best thing to do that. So that's what the first one was. In the second one, I sort of went over some general concept and ideas of like what the transformation states could be. So looking at how Luffy's gears is how I chose to do on the second video. And that's sort of what the second video was about, was sort of explaining how the transformations could work and why I feel like these could actually be more unique. Even if they have nothing to actually do with glass, they just felt a little bit more unique and a little bit more mysterious to give a little bit more of a it just felt like giving more of a mysterious vibe to it, because I felt like I wanted this Delphi, this power, to be like mysterious. I wanted to be like the world's most mysterious Delphi power, right? The world's most extraordinary power that you don't know what it means. You don't know anything about it. Like, it's completely unknown. I want it to be something, but you don't know what that is. Yes, and I'll have a link to those two videos down here below. So feel free to go check those out if you want to. Okay. All right. Now let's get into context of what this video is, alright? So I explained this in my previous video that for the third video I'm going to be going over Japanese Garasu and stuff like that, and sort of explaining, like, looking at different Japanese words for glasses or glass, and sort of giving a good insight or a good idea of why, and trying to see if we can find some kind of a pattern. Like look at the chapters themselves. I can't necessarily show everything because I don't want to get copyrighted like that. However, I'll probably explain where the chapter is, and I'll explain what goes on in the chapter if I need to, and only show if I feel like it's actually necessary and something that's important. But just to keep it simple, let's just finish up with this rubber and glass video that I started, and let's see if anyone else out there ever becomes a fan of the idea of having Nami become the moon and goddess and like that. I mean, yeah, she's already considered a goddess. Who's to say that she doesn't deserve to have the powers of the goddess? All right. So let's start with this one. So in no particular order, like that. Let's just start with this one and stuff like that. Okay. So the first one we'll do is with Garasu. So Garasu is basically the simpler version of spelling the word glass, right? And this Garasu is actually for the substance of glass, right? So this basically refers to the substance. Okay. Now I mentioned in my previous videos that one of the fake names I had for the Delphi was Gara, which would obviously be a reference to glass. And the Garasu actually is right from the Dutch word glas. So that's actually where this translation comes from. Okay. Now, when looking up Garasu and stuff like that, and the Gorsei and like that, I came across two possible translations. So 564 and 504. So let's focus on 564 right here. Okay. So in 564, in chapter 564, the title of the chapter is called "The Man Who Shook the World." Now, what basically goes on in this chapter is this is during the Marineford arc, the Marineford War arc and stuff like that, when Luffy was trying to save Ace and stuff like that. You know, the whole battle of Marineford, Whitebeard joins in the battle. It's it's during that, okay. And there's one part in this panel that actually has me intrigued, is that whenever Oda has Whitebeard showing off his Delphi road, and he's like showing it off, it's almost like, in a way, it's almost like he's like breaking glass in a way, right? Like, it's kind of like breaking glass, even though he's not like literally breaking glass. It's the way that Oda's showing it to be utilized on us is like showing, is like breaking glass, right? And there's actually more to go into this, and why this is actually interesting is because of the because of Whitebeard's Delphi, right? Well, right now it's in the hands of Blackbeard, but at the time it was Whitebeard's, okay? So who has it now and then doesn't really matter. Or the Gura thing is the focus thing, all right? It's not matter. It doesn't matter like who has it. It's the Delphi itself, okay? But what I want to point out here on the Gura Nami and stuff like that is that Gura, that if you take Gura and add Su to the end of it, you can get another translation of glass, and that's Garasu. Now, Garasu is actually used for glass drinks. So, like, you know, a glass mug and stuff like that, it's used for a drinking glass rather than the substance of glass, okay? So, that's one thing to go over, right? Now, before I continue further, I need to go back to the Garasu because I still have another one on that one I need to mention, all right? So, if we look at another Gorosei translation, we get 504. So, Ga for 5, Ra can be used for 6 or 0, and then Su can be for 4. So another translation we got is 504, Frontline Pirates on the Move. Now this basically happens during the Sabio. I'm having a hard time pronouncing that word. But basically what happens in this chapter is that it's not very far away from when Luffy punched the Celestial Dragon and things like that and caused an admiral to come. And during this chapter is actually when we get introduction of Kizaru, who is on his way to the Sabio. I still can't pronounce it. I'm sure everyone knows what place I'm talking about, okay? I do apologize like that. I'm really trying to like that. Yeah. But yes, and just like I mentioned before, that I could see the Delphi itself, like the moon goddess or whatever the name might be, basically getting most of its power from sunlight itself. Like it's like gets its power just in the same way like maybe Nika does, like Sun God Nika, because just like how moonlight is just sunlight reflected off the moon, which is actually a really good way to see why glass can be important, because glass is one of the most unique things on Earth. I mean, there are other things as well, like anything with a shiny, anything with like a shiny plate to it, and it's like that can cause a reflection and it's like that. So it's not just glass, but glass is one of the most unique things that we actually use for reflective surfaces. All right, so that's one of the reasons why, but there are many other reasons why another thing could be such a good idea, but I choose to go with glass. Okay, all right, so that's on the whole Garasu and stuff like that. So let me know if there's anything you feel like there's anything important on the Garasu. Feel free to let me know. Okay, so now let's move on to the next one, and we have Garasu. So just like I mentioned before, I mentioned the Garasu and stuff like that just a few moments ago, but going to the Gorosei translations, we got 904 and 964. So these are the two translations I can, two Gorosei numbers I can get. Let's look at 904, introducing the Revolutionary Army captains. So yes, this is during when the Revolutionary Army captains were actually being introduced. And the one character I want to mention here is Bello Betty. All right, now it's not necessarily Bello Betty that's important, but her Delphi. So in the first video I mentioned on the S, I mentioned the idea and the concept of maybe the Delphi basically has someone have the ability to manipulate others' emotions, because one of the fan names or the fake names I gave off on it was Nico Nami. Nico could be usually derived from sunlight, from the Nico sunlight. It might also be a good way to like if it needs a fake name, you can name it after Nami would probably name it after Nico Robin. Another situation could be is that it can also be a reference to Sun God Nika. Another thing that it could also be the fact that it doesn't actually necessarily just go off the ability to where you get your power from, but also what your powers are able to do. Like, yeah, your body's made of glass, but that's not the main thing. And your main power is able to manipulate and control others' emotions, and this is done by manipulating the colors of those people. So, like, you know, you remove all the red from if the red is supposed to stand for like rage and anger, depending on like what their colors is and what colors represent, taking those colors away from them is all dependent on what it means. So, and yeah, so just like Bello Betty's Delphi or the Pump Fruit allows encouragement, and that gets people pumping and full of energy. It gives them like it sort of gives them positive energy, which almost fits in a way from what I'm describing here. Okay, with the whole idea of the Nico Nami, which I might call the mood fruit in English, even though mood doesn't actually translate from Nico. It's the idea of Nico calendar, or which, I mean, the whole idea is coming from the Nico calendar, which another translation of the Nico calendar, or in some English translations, could be considered like the mood board or the mood calendar, or which, just going off of that, okay? All right. And the next one we want to focus on is 964. Now, what happens in 964? Well, in 964, we have Odin's adventure. Yes, this is the chapter in which Odin actually leaves Wano for the first time, and at the end of the chapter, he meets Toki. All right, yes, this is the same chapter where Odin actually met Toki. And this actually fits well because many people out there in the fan base, especially LuffyxNami fans, have brought up very many similarities that Luffy and Nami actually share with Odin and Toki. Also, it's important to mention here that that when you look at the meanings of the meanings of Odin's family names like that, it translates into moonlight. And to even further us along, remember that Toki actually mentioned something before she died. Now, she didn't actually direct this in Nami because Nami wasn't born yet, right? Toki doesn't even probably know who Nami is. She probably never will, right? And well, definitely she doesn't know who she is, so I don't even know why I said it like that, right? But remember that before she died, she stated it's something very important, that you are the moon, unaware of the dawn. Now, this could obviously be used for any reference. Toki was just probably saying that. But imagine that even though Toki was just saying that to everyone, what if in reality Oda's mind was implying that to only one person? Even though Toki was applying it to everyone, Oda only has it planned for one person. Now, who that one person is hard to say. But if it's someone, then maybe that someone has been the third Straw Hat all this time. All right. So now we got those one out of the way. Let's move on to another one. So next one we got is Hari. Now, Hari actually can be translated into glass or crystal, right? Now, another translation of Hari is actually needles, okay? Now, the thing we're focusing on is basically glass. So, Hari can translate into 86. So, the Gorosei can be 86. Now, what exactly happens in this chapter? Well, this is Chivalry versus Fisherman Karate. So, there's not much to go on in this chapter that I can really think of to give like a really good warrant on this. In this chapter, it's just basically Sanji versing. This is during when Nami's moment, during when the whole Arlong fight was going on, during the Arlong Park arc, when Luffy and the gang were trying to help Nami and free her village and things like that. That's what happens in this chapter. And in this chapter, it's mostly Sanji's fight against. I should have wrote that down. That fish guy's name and stuff like that. I totally forgot to write down his name. But that's basically what happens in the chapter and stuff like that. That's what that chapter is about. However, probably the most interesting thing on here is that if we look at the the cover story and stuff like that, it features Nami sitting on a dock, holding Mikan in her hand, looking like not like concerned, not maybe like confused, but maybe more like she's in thought. Like she looks like she's in thought, like questioning, like wondering, like, should I eat this? That's sort of like how I'm sort of getting a feeling on it. And another thing to necessarily point out here is that if you actually look at the lion seal next to her, I believe it's lion seal. It might just be a regular seal. The headband on his head, that it almost looks like the Delphi design, right? It looks like a Delphi design, which almost can imply that the fruit the Delphi might be actually based on a meat kitten, and that the fruit design will actually look like that. Now, that's probably just a bit of a stretch since this was created like nearly like 25 or let's see, I know we're in like 26th anniversary now, so depending on when this chapter dropped, it might have been only like 25 years to 26 years. So the chances of that being the same again for this very long would be impressive nonetheless. I mean, if Oda had that plan from the very beginning, that's impressive to still choose to do that, right? So, very good Oda. Alright. So, let's move into another one. So, okay. Alright. So, this one's going to be probably the biggest portion of it all. It's like that. So, hey, if you stick around this long, I appreciate it very much. If you're having a good time, feel free to continue on. It's like that. So, let's just continue. Alright, so the next one I want to go over is Shoshi. Now, Shoshi is an obsolete translation of glass, right? Now, what Shoshi is that it's an alternate, from what I understand, it's an alternate translation of Garasu. So, Garasu has two different translations, right? Or two different spellings. So, there is there's like the regular katakana spellings like that, and then there is one that features like actual kanji, right? Now, the kanji translations has another spelling of it, and that's the Shoshi one. Even though Shoshi isn't actually used anymore, or it can still be used in some texts, but in reality, Shoshi is not actually used no more. Alright. Now, in order to get Shoshi, you have to break down the spelling and stuff like that. And the spellings and translations that it is shi, yo, yu, shi. So that would be S-H-I-Y-O-U-S-H-I. Alright. Now, if we're to translate this entire Gorosei numbers and look at every numbers that these words can reflect, the entire numbers that, from what I can get, are 4454. So that's 4,454. Now, unfortunately, there is no chapter 4,454. So, in order to really do this, it's probably best if we actually break this down and look at the closest things that we can get off of this, okay? Alright. And I think the best thing to do is to actually go around to chapters the 440 mark. So I think this will be important. Now, like I said, I can't really go through every single one. It's like that because, yeah, like while there might be a lot of good translations, I don't want to risk getting copyright and like that or any kind of motions or whatever it is. So I'm trying to be very careful on this. Okay. All right. So let's start with this one. All right. So I'll put these ones two back to back. So, all right. So we'll start with 444. Right. So 444. So in this one is titled Adventure at Ghost Island. So this is basically the first chapter where the Straw Hats, or basically where Nami and Usopp and Chopper basically go to the Throwbark Island. So this is not long after they met Brook. They decide to go to the Throwbark Island and to investigate and figure out what's going on. It's like that. So that's what happens in that chapter, okay? Now, another thing to point out here is that this is the same chapter that we actually get to meet, well, before I actually continue it's like that, I need to actually mention one more thing. So let's go back one chapter beforehand to 443, and this chapter is titled Thriller Bark. Now, in this chapter, or this is when the chapter when Brook is actually sort of explaining like why he can't actually go with the Straw Crew, explain why he has to stay behind. They learn about the whole shadow thing, and there's also a funny moment in the panel here where Nami holds up a mirror, and Brook's reflection is not in the mirror, not because not because of him being bones, but because of his shadow was stolen. It's like that. And later in this chapter, we actually get to meet one of Perona's ghosts. Now, why is this important here? Because Perona's Delphi is sort of the opposite in a way of how Bello Betty's is that it allows her to cause negative emotions, while Bello Betty is the complete opposite that allows positive energy. So one for negative, another one for positive. But that doesn't end there, because to go back to the 444 is also the first chapter where Absalom appears. Absalom, who has the clear root. And just like I mentioned in my previous video, one of my ideas for the transformations of the glass root is for the user to become invisible. To basically be like a glass that has no sight. Like you can't see it. Like it's glass, but it's glass that you see beyond. Like you just don't see the person, you see what's beyond the glass. Yes. And that's one thing to point out here like that. And that doesn't even stop it from the fact that, yes, we're talking about the Thriller Bark arc, right? Kuma is introduced in the Thriller Bark arc, right? The same one who has the Delphi, the Niku Nami, with the numbers 29. Many people, one of the very first SBS, well, not the very first SBS question, I shouldn't be phrasing it like that, but who has a Delphi fruit that can also manipulate others' feelings and emotions, right? Like his pawpaw fruit allows him to basically turn intangible things into tangible things. This can be memories, feelings, things, whatever it may be. He can like reflect. He can reflect attacks back. So it's interesting when you think about that. All right. Now let's continue on even further to say like chapter 445. Nothing important really goes on in this chapter. It's like that. This is just titled a zombie, and all that happens in this chapter is just basically Nami, Usopp, and Chopper are having a conversation with a strawberry on their way to meet Hogback. And sure, there is a moment in the panel where Nami is drinking a glass wine cup up, but I don't think that's very much important here because a lot of people in the One Piece world has probably drunk out of glass cups. It's been done from the very beginning of chapter 1, so I don't think it's very much important like who drinks out of a glass cup up, but let's just continue on and see what we can come up with and things like that. So, all right. So I think the next one we'll go to is 454, and this chapter is titled Humming. Now, what happens in this chapter is that this is the chapter where, all right, so in the previous chapter, both Robin and Frankie reunite with Brooke. So Brooke actually comes back here, and humming is basically, it's reference to Brooke's humming. So, or Brooke's epithet at humming. Crap, what was it called again? Humming. I completely forgot his epithet name. So, let's see. Okay. Actually, there is one thing I should probably mention here. So, like I mentioned before, like the Shoshi translation of glass, there are actually two things I want to go over necessarily. Okay. So let's do it this one first. So while we're in the whole position of the Shoshi translations of glass, one thing I want to point out here is that for 453, which is one chapter before 454, or the chapter title is called "Cloudy with the Chance of Bones." All right. Now in this cover story, we actually have the I believe they're called what were they called? I don't think they're called tontadas. I think those are the dwarves and dinosaurs, but these are basically like these little robot guys that use the balloons to fly up to the moon and stuff like that. And the interesting thing I want to point out here is that something very important, that during the third bark arc, that the Gorosei translations of this time, the Shoshi translates in glass, the interesting thing that I actually want to point out here is that this actually happens during Inaru's Great Moon exploration. Yes, so during the Thor Bark arc, around this time is actually during the Inaru's cover story where Inaru is traveling on the moon itself. Yes, on the moon itself, which is another good reference and another good idea of how you connect these two things together. Where one of the glass translations of the Gorosei for glass, Shoshi, is happening around the same time when the Straw Hats were in Thor Bark, but at the same time, the cover story of Inaru's Great Moon exploration is also happening around that time. Right. Now, here are a few bonus things I want to go over necessarily. So, alright, so here's two bonus things I want to go over. Alright, so first thing is to look at chapter 50. So, in chapter 50 is a parting of ways. Now, it's not really what happens in the chapter, but the cover story I want to mention. So, in the cover story, we get to meet, I think it's the first chapter to actually feature a giant crab. I'm hoping I'm not mistaken on that. I didn't go through the whole process of looking at every single chapter to give a good memory, just to remember if there was another crab that happened beforehand. But just in case, I do apologize if I made a mistake. Okay, but another thing to point out here is that, Nika's adult fruit root, Nika, if you actually reverse the spellings on it, you get Kani, which is a reference to crab. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is that if we go to another chapter that features a giant crab, in chapter 571, in this chapter, or the execution platform, happens, this is happening during the time when Ace is being executed, like that. So this happens around this time. But in the cover story, we actually have Nami, who is getting her haircut who's getting her haircut from a Kani, basically a crab, and she's standing in front of a mirror. Here, so, it probably doesn't necessarily prove anything, and it's just something to just throw in there as a bit of a bonus, but it's just something to basically reflect, okay? So that's all it is. Now, there's one other glass translation to go over, or necessary, and unfortunately, this chapter has not happened yet, but it could be possible that this could actually come into place, and then again, it could be possible that it won't come into place, okay? So, the next translation we got is Bidoro. Now, Bidoro is actually, I believe it's actually the Japanese translation of Bidoro. I believe that's what the translation is. And the Gorosei numbers I got on this is 1106. 1106. Now, we're right now in the current storyline right now, we are in chapter 1088. We're about to come into 1089 as soon as the chapter gets back from its break. Okay. And as we start to continue on here, I mentioned in the last video, before I ended off, I gave one of my biggest reasons why I believe Nami could be perfect for the Delphoid ruins like that, and why I believe she might be the one to do it, is because in the idea I sort of gave here is that if you went to chapter, let's see, what chapter was it again? I believe it was 1000. No, it wasn't 1001. It was crap. Yeah, it was one. Wait, how was it again? 1011, I believe that's how it is. So basically it would be 1011. So in that chapter, in the color spread that Oda gave us, he basically features the Straw Hats eating ice cream. And the thing to point out here is that Nami is actually a giant in the background. Now, why is this important? Well, if you watched the last video, I basically mentioned here that it's interesting the fact that Oda chose to represent Nami as the giant in this panel. And if we actually look up some things about Nami necessarily, such as her nationality that Oda gave her is Sweden. In Sweden, the word for ice cream is translated as glass, which probably gives more evidence and more of a good reason for why Nami might be the one to actually get this Delphoid. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean 100% factual that Nami is going to get the Delphoid road. And even if she doesn't, I'm perfectly fine with the audience like that. Oda has given her such a unique ability with having the Climate Act and having Zeus as her arsenal. So even if she doesn't get it, she's always going to be a goddess in my mind. She's always going to be very powerful. So whatever Oda's going to choose for her, even if it doesn't have to do with the whole moon goddess becoming a glassy state body, is perfectly fine. If this does come to fruition, I'm going to be excited as hell. You can guarantee that. Alright, so it does bring up a good possibility and it's like that. And another thing to point out here is that if you actually reverse the translations on that, alright, so reverse that around for the, hey, knock that off. So you reverse those numbers around, you get 1, 1, 0, 10. And looking at the first three numbers, we get 1, 1, 1, 0, which obviously you can translate into hito. Hito being the Japanese translation for human, which is obviously where Luffy's and Chopper's devil fruit actually comes from being the hito meaning human fruit. Which, I mean, that's probably a bit of a stretch on that part, Art. That's probably that's probably a bit of a stretch on that part, and I will admit that, okay? So that's all the main things I got on the necessariness like that. That's pretty much all the important things. I don't think there's anything else I really need to explain. You know, I'll do this one too. It's probably not that big of important, but I'll just explain it, okay? So, going to the whole Bidoro situation. Yeah, another thing to point out here is that if you actually take the B part from Bidoro, and if you add it with the Japanese kanji for ball, which is tama, which, yes, in putting these together, you get bidama. And bidama basically translates into a glass ball, right? It's basically a translation used for glass ball, such as, like, a good way to describe it would be like a marble. Oh, yes, like a marble in a way, like a glass ball. Oh, and plus, it might also have a good way to reference Tama from Wano Kun and stuff like that. That might be a good way to reference it. But if we actually look at the Japanese Gorosei for Bidama, I get 130. Now, what happens in chapter 130? Well, in chapter 130, this is the same chapter when Nami was sick around this time. And then she, basically, this is the same chapter where Nami completely astonished destroyed crew, and especially Vivi, who was completely mind blown that Nami was able to feel, or basically feel the change in the weather so easily in the Grand Line, something that Vivi said is almost impossible, even for the big time people who have been doing this for ages. Is predicting the change of the weather in the Grand Line has been nearly impossible, even for those who have professionally done it for many years, and Nami completely astonished her. So, yes, it's probably nothing has anything to do with this whole glass thing, but I figured it might be important to throw in there because it has something to do. And it's one of the first, because of that chapter and because of it, that is one of the many things that actually spun into a lot of people's fan bases on Nami to really give a good insight. And ideas on why Nami might be more special than we might realize. Alright, so that's just a bit of a bonus to throw in there. It probably has nothing to do with this whole glass thing, and to be honest, there's a chance I'd be throwing a lot of things in here just for the sake of arguments like that. And hey, that's really all up to you guys and how you guys choose to see it like that. But that's pretty much all I have to got. That's I believe that's everything. So just make sure. Yeah, so that's everything I wrote down, and I don't believe there's anything else I forgot. Let me just make sure. No? Oh, wait. Yes. Before I end it off, there's one thing I need to mention here. Okay. So, this is a bit of an idea. So, just bear with me on this, okay? So, my idea is on this. So, alright. So, back to the whole Shoshi translation, alright? So, if we look up the kanji for Shoshi and stuff like that, from what I understand, another translation or spelling that we can go on it is shoko, right? Now, shoko is obviously used because, like, so if you look at the translation of Garasu or Shoshi using the kanji spelling, and if you actually look at the different translations of the kanji, one is sho, and the other actually has the kanji for child, which is ko, which another translation could be shoko, which is used for female names. Now, the thing I want to point out here is that if we look up shoko spellings and see other kind of translations on shoko and what we can get out of it. So it's not necessarily shoko translated into glass that's important I want to focus on. No, that's not what I want to focus on, alright? What I want to focus on is other translations of shoko that we can get. And here's something that we can actually get out of shoko. Shoko, in some cases, can translate into things like bell and drums. It can also translate other things too. It can also translate into things like flute and drums. But I want to focus on the bell and drums, alright? Now, we know that Luffy's like Sun God Nika allows his heartbeats to sound like a drum, like the drums of liberations, like that. And it's interesting to point out here is that during this time when Sun God Nika, or the whole first concept of Sun God was revealed, was during the Sky Island arc, the same arc during the time when the Strats were celebrating and like that, Usopp was banging on a drum, and then not to mention the whole idea and the fact that, you know, Luffy was wanting to prove that Skyline exists, and the way he could do that was by ringing the bell. So imagine the whole concept of like Sun God Nika's heartbeat sounding like the drum, sounding like a drum. But here, for the concept of the moon goddess herself, the actual moon god or moon goddess, whatever you like to refer to it, their heartbeat sounds like a bell. So the drums of liberation and the bells of I don't know. I don't actually know what to consider calling that at. So, hey, if any of you guys got some great ideas on the bells of something, then please let me know. Like, hey, one thing, Oda could probably take a good reference from the bells of Notre Dame, and maybe Oda might be able to do a pun on that ad. So, maybe Oda can do a pun on Dawn. So the bells of Notre Dame, like it might be a good way to throw in a bit of a romance Dawn reference, or a bit of a romance Dawn situation. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be possible, or it might be a little insulting to some people. If it is, I do apologize for giving that ad. So that's pretty much all I have on that part. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else important. So oh, actually, there's one more thing. I can't believe I almost forgot about this. So, all right. So when looking up the so basically, as we know, Nika's name, if we reverse it around, we get Kani for crab. Now, if we look up a crab, and one of the main things that crabs have are like shells. So other animals have shells too. But if we look up the translation of shell, there are two different translations or translations I want to focus on. Number one is Kara, but another way to translate Kara is actually Nagara, which can actually be another good way to utilize the fact of using the glass for ruins like that. A bit of a reference there, a bit of a I see the connection. Yeah, very clever. But another thing I want to point out here is the another translation is Kaku. Now, it's not necessarily the word Kaku, but looking up another word or another translation that Kaku can be translated into. And something they can translate it into is into draw or paint, which is a very good way to sort of going off the fact here that I'm basically saying, like, all right, so take for instance that Luffy's awakening basically takes inspiration from Rubber Hose animations, and what I decided to do for the fact that Nami's or this Devil Fruit awakening abilities would allow it to use more of paint on glass animations, all right? But the thing I want to point out here is that the fact that I'm utilizing the Devil Fruit itself as paint on glass animation, and in the fact that I'm focusing on painting, if we look at this Kaku translation of a guy, and then if you put up the kanji for Neko, meaning cat, right next to it, you might notice that the two kanjis look very similar, or with just the minor few detail differences, right? But if you did not actually pay close attention, you would actually see these two things as being very similar, so that's just something to throw in there as a bit of a throw in. And so doesn't necessarily have to mean anything, probably not, all right? And that even goes back to basically sort of describing what I mentioned here is that, with Luffy's Devil Fruit itself, whenever he transforms into Nika, the white in the light is supposed to reflect how the sun is technically. Like, even though we give it like a bit of a yellowish and reddish color, or it's basically white. And that's how Oda does the Devil Fruit. And that's how I'm thinking of actually utilizing Nami's Devil Fruit, or this Devil Fruit in this case, is that maybe white could actually reflect a bit of a positive energy. So more positive emotions that are filled into it, her hair becomes white. If too much negative is filled into it, then it basically becomes black. And that's the thing of how colors work, is that both black and white are the combination of all colors. And there are also two colors that are without hue. They don't have any hues. White is the combination of all addictive colors, while black is the combination of all subtractive colors. And another thing to point out here is that if we're looking for a perfect balance here, another color without hue is actually gray. White, black, and gray are the three top colors. Now, there are probably other colors as well, but in terms of like the top three, usually white, black, and gray are often used to give the three top most examples of name colors that don't have hue. And white, black, and gray would be one of the top three. And gray is sort of the inner between white and black. So it's the perfect match between the two that reflects both sides. And this could actually be a good way to utilize that if the person is in perfect balance, if they have just enough balance of white and black, then they reflect more of a gray tone. If too much positive emotions inside them, then they reflect white. If they have too much negative emotions inside them, then they reflect black. But if the balance is perfect, they'll reflect gray. And that's sort of the idea I have on the Devil Fruit. So that's pretty much all I got for this video. It's like that. That's basically it for this Nami supposedly getting Moon Goddess Devil Fruit, and the whole idea that the whole idea is that they get like a glass body. So Luffy's like the whole Sun God Nika transforms their body into rubber properties, and allowing this to give the user more of a glassy state just felt more natural. I just felt like it made more sense to me. So that's pretty much it. So that's the final end of the video. So hey, thank you so much for joining me. That's all I got. If there's anything that you feel like it needs to be said, please let me know by leaving a comment down below. If you did enjoy the video and you liked anything I said, please smash that like button, right? And if you want to see more of my content and want to see more videos in the future, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit notification bells. That way you can be keep up to date on when I post the next video. So thank you so much for joining me for this Nami video, and you all have a great day.